Welcome back, everybody, from the break. Hope everybody is energized and ready for the second session of the second day of the event here. Let's get started. I'd like to welcome to the stage Martin Welschof, CEO of BioInvent. Welcome, Martin.
Nice to meet you. Thank you. And welcome, everybody. So I'm very happy to give you a quick update on BioInvent. So also we had today our quarterly report, which I think was very well received. So just jumping right in. So this is our snapshot. As you remember, we are focusing on immuno-oncology. And we have a portfolio strategy, which means we not only have one program, but several programs, currently 5, that are in clinical development. And the company is rather integrated. So we have discovery, manufacturing, as well as clinical development, all under one roof, which allows us to push ahead with a broad portfolio. And we have been quite active, as you can see, in financing the last couple of years. So we did a number of deals, did 3 financings, which leaves us still with a good bank account. So we have currently still 140 million US on our bank account, which is based on current planning, roughly a runway for until the end of 25 into early 2026, which I think is a very comfortable position to be in. As you can see, the platform and technology that we use has been validated through a number of deals, most recently with Exelixis. And for Exelixis, also we ticked off a milestone, the first milestone in our collaboration during this year. But then we also have antibodies in clinical development with Daiichi, Mitsubishi, Takeda, and Bayer. The shareholder base, you know that, strong international shareholder base. So 5 years ago, I think the company is mainly in the hand of retail investors, small Swedish investors. Now we turned it around. So now we have 70% with large institutions, the name you see up there. Strong US as well as European institutions. And that gives us the support that we need in order to execute on the strategy that we're currently having. At the core of the company, just very briefly, I will not go into much detail, we have a very sophisticated and interesting, unique screening tool, which allows us to screen directly on patient material. And we have a very close collaboration with a local hospital here in Lund, such that we receive fresh patient material on a regular basis that we then use in our screens to identify new targets and new mode of actions. And at the end, we also identify the target. So it's called a phenotypic reverse screening, which is really unique and proprietary to BioInvent. And that's the platform that we're using ourselves, as well as for those partners that I mentioned on the previous slide. With that platform, we have built this portfolio that you see, quite busy, 5 compounds currently in clinical development. And we focus on 3 targets. One is Fc-gamma-RIIb, which is a very interesting inhibitory receptor on the innate immune system. There we have 3 clinical programs ongoing. Then on TNF receptor 2, we also have currently 3 programs ongoing. So 2 different, 1 compound, soon 2 different compounds. And then it's CTLA-4 that we run in collaboration with Transgene. And I will go now very quickly and briefly through the various programs, and we'll focus mainly on the highlights. So this is BI-1206, our lead for non-Hodgkin lymphoma that we run in combination with rituximab. We have finished the dose escalation. We have seen very good responses. You can see 3 partial responses, 4 complete responses, a couple of stable diseases. And I think what is really important here to note is that we have long-lasting complete responses. So now we have 3 patients that are more than 2.5 years in complete response, which is almost cured. And I think that's exactly what the regulators are looking after. So the status here is we develop 2 versions, IV as well as sub-Q. And the IV, we have finished the dose escalation, are now in dose expansion, and the sub-Q is currently still in dose escalation. And we hope to release the data early next year. So good progress. And we clearly have shown already and demonstrated that this compound is working. Then we developed this one also in combination with pembrolizumab for solid tumors. They were a little bit more early. It's still in dose escalation. But we have seen also already quite some nice signs of efficacy. We have 2 stable diseases, 2 partial responses. And you have to keep in mind those are patients that have seen a number of anti-PD-1 or anti-PD-L1 containing regimens. and they did not respond anymore. And if you see response here, it's a big deal. So also here we're quite bullish, and we have started also the sub-Q version for BI-1206 also in development in combination with pembrolizumab. 1607, this is our second anti-Fc gamma R2b, so you can see what we're trying to do. Once we have identified an interesting target, we try to own the space. We are not only developing one compound, but normally several compounds. And 1607 is currently in clinical development in combination with trastuzumab. And here the next data set will be presented on the San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium at the end of the year, which will be the first data set for BI-1607. So the study is running well. We see the PK/PD that we want to see. We see safety, and the rest will be presented on the San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium. That's the next step there. Then moving into the TNF receptor 2, and maybe at the beginning a little bit of background. TNF receptor 2 is actually a new target from immuno-oncology. We were one of the first companies working on it. By now we have Novartis, BeiGene, and a couple of other companies also working on it, but we are still at least 1 year ahead of them, which is actually quite great. And we have released the 1808, and we developed it in 2 versions, as a single agent as well as in combination with pembrolizumab or Keytruda. And the single agent data is out, so we could see it's safe. We saw a couple of stable diseases, and what I can tell you is that we have an update on SITC, which is coming up, where we have further data to present on the single agent arm of BI-1808. So that would be the next step here, and then the first data set for the combination with pembrolizumab will be out during the first half of next year. Then BT-001, this is the combination that we run with Transgene as a joint venture. So we combine Transgene's oncolytic virus platform with our anti-CTLA-4 antibody. We have shown that it's safe. We could show first tumor responses. So we had a stabilization in injected lesion, 11 out of 18 patients, 50% overall tumor response, so actually quite nice. And we just moved now into the next step, or the next step of the clinical development, which is the combination with pembrolizumab, and that is now running. So at the end, I'm just looking here at the time. Actually, I'm a little bit faster than I wanted, but anyway. At the end, the external pipeline and the key catalyst, because what I mentioned at the beginning very briefly is, of course, we have a lot of collaborations, which is the foundation or the basis for an external pipeline, which is shown here on this slide. And you can see the various clinical developments which are ongoing with Takeda, Mitsubishi, Bayer, and Daiichi. They are now phase 1, phase 2. And of course, that drives, as we go forward, clinical development milestones, commercial milestones, and eventually then, if it goes into the market, royalties. But of course, this is something which is long-term. And I think the important message here is really that this is a validator of our platform. It's not only that BioInvent, we are using our platform to generate a portfolio and bring it into clinical development, but also those large pharmaceutical companies are doing it. And then at the bottom of this slide, you see the most recent collaboration that we established with Exelixis. And there also we already ticked off the first milestone when they picked the first lead out of that collaboration. So I think that is also nice to see that we not only wait for the end game, but can generate some income already now based on our platform and our capabilities. Then at the end, the value inflection points. So there's still, as you can see, 3 outstanding. So I mentioned 1808, and I think this is something actually quite exciting because TNF receptor 2 could be a new checkpoint, and then 1808 would be a new checkpoint inhibitor. And what we present on SITC is really this further single agent data that we have accumulated over time. So we had a press release on that already. But then you have to keep in mind, this is solid cancer patients, sometimes patients that have been treated with 12 regimens before. And before you see really the first partial responses, et cetera, you need time. And that time we have now, and I'm really looking forward to the SITC presentation. Then the other data set that is coming is obviously 1607, our second Fc gamma R2b antibody in combination with trastuzumab, and that will be presented on the San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium at the end of the year. And then last but not least, we want to start our clinical development number 6, which is BI-1910, which is our second anti-TNF receptor 2 antibody. Again, also demonstrating how we move here, because TNF receptor 2 seems to be a very interesting target, and that's why we want to develop different flavors. 1808 is a blocking deleting antibody. 1910 will be an agonistic antibody. And when you look at the competitors, I mentioned Novartis, I mentioned BeiGene, they're either one or the other. We have both. And I think with this, I will end. Perfect.
Thank you, Martin. Perfect timing. Well, first of all, is there anybody in the audience with any questions? Kim is ready to hand over the mic if anybody has any questions. No? They're all written here, I guess. All right. Actually, I want to start with my own question. The slogan for the company is unleashing immunity to fight cancer. Could you tell us a little bit what that means exactly? Why is that important?
Yeah, so normally, when you look at cancer, so why do we have cancer? We have cancer because our immune system is failing, yeah, for whatever reason. There are different reasons for it. But normally you have this kind of mutations that cells change on a regular basis, and your immune system would take them out. Yeah. And if that is not working, then you can either go, the classical way, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, which is very non-targeted, so it works, but it hits you also in total, not just the cancer. And then what we are doing is immunomodulation. So we basically identify targets that we can use in order to switch the immune system on or off. So off would be interesting in the context of autoimmune diseases. Since we are immuno-oncology, you want to switch them on. Or if it's an inhibitory receptor, you want to switch them off. So basically you want to activate the immune system. And that is more mild and also probably more powerful, because if you look at the most important cancer drug at the moment, which is pembrolizumab, Keytruda, this is also an immune modulator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to. You mentioned at the very beginning, you just released your quarterly report, which basically it says you have almost 1.4 billion in liquid funds, but your market cap right now is 1 billion. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah. Well, it sucks, but I can give a more qualified comment. So I think this is really following the sentiment at the moment. So I just recently looked at a nice graph of Centerview. Centerview is the largest M&A bank that is not only doing M&As, and they basically analyzed 100+ companies from the immuno-oncology space, which are preclinical or early clinical. And they're all the same. It's all the same pattern, independent whether they have money or they don't have money. And the reason for that is that, of course, during market sentiments like we have at the moment, the investors look at the risk. And the risk, of course, if your early clinical development is still high, even though the potential is enormous. And I expect, so also with the data that is coming now, so I mentioned the end of the year with SITC, and then also what I didn't mention during my presentation, we'll have more mature data second half of next year. And then when the market sentiment, in addition, also changes, it will just turn the other way around. Yeah, so we're not alone, unfortunately. So this is currently the flavor of the day. Yeah.
Well, going back to specifically your pipeline, we have a question here that asks, how might subcutaneous formulation with BI-1206 impact patient experience and the overall effectiveness compared to intravenous administration?
Yeah. So we didn't release the data yet, and the reason for that is that we want to accumulate more data rather than going out with just 5 or 6 patients worth of data. So what I can tell you is that we could escalate up to 150 mg without any problems. It's safe and looks nice. And the data that we've seen with the IV, so partial responses and complete responses, actually below that concentration. So we're at a dose range that is interesting. And of course, I can't disclose anything more since we didn't disclose it yet, but it will be soon, first half of next year. Yeah, we see interesting stuff.
Yeah, looking forward to that. One more question is still regarding BI-1808. What are your expectations and goals for the phase 2A part of the trial involving 1808 as a single agent in advanced malignancy?
Yeah. Yeah, I hopped over that. It was on the slide, actually. Good question. So what we did during the dose escalation part that we have done now, up to 1,000 mg, actually flat dose, was completely safe. We saw what we saw. the stable diseases, the safety profile, which is very good. And that was all comers, basically. Patients that were heavily pretreated. As I said, in some cases, even up to 12 times with different other things. And we saw what we saw, and we saw what we will disclose on SITC, so that's actually quite nice. And now we're moving actually in parallel in different dose expansion cohorts. So it will be ovarian cancer, CTCL, which is a rare T-cell lymphoma, non-small cell lung cancer. Thank you. And then it will be also melanoma. And actually, melanoma is actually quite interesting. So there are three very interesting. Non-small cell lung cancer is obvious. We should do because it's a very large indication and we have potential there. Ovarian cancer is very interesting because that's where we identified the target using our first platform. And there's no immune checkpoint treatment approved yet, which makes it very interesting because that will be then checkpoint naive patients. Melanoma, we can actually work quite close to first line, which makes it also super, super interesting as a single agent. And then CTCL is interesting because those T-cell lymphoma cells express the target themselves. And those trials will all run the same way. So we'll have first a signal-seeking part, which will be around 15 patients. And then once we see a signal, we move into a dose optimization part, which will be another 20 patients. So that means at the end, you would have an interesting patient data set of about 35 patients. And when you see a good signal there, then I think we are very much in business.
Sounds very interesting. Well, thank you so much, Martin, for answering these questions and your presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah. And now I'd like to welcome to the stage Lisa Szczepanova-Albrektsson, CEO of TrackPaw. Welcome, Lisa.
For those of you following the agenda on your notebooks, look a little bit confused now. That's not Carlos from Ultimovacs. It isn't. BioStock decided to invite an underdog from deep tech that is still within life science, and I'll explain to you how. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Szczepanova-Albrektsson, and I am the co-founder and CEO of TrackPaw Scientific, where we're contributing to the development of safe and effective pharmaceuticals at increased speed and quality. Drug development consists of many stages. However, the preclinical phase and animal testing is an absolutely crucial part for new medicines and therapies to even reach the clinical stage. Experts say that this will continue this way for 25 to 30 years, as there's no other solutions that can systemically mimic a reaction to a therapy. However, we rely on very outdated ways of supervising and looking into how the animal's well-being and welfare is looking like. Today, researchers spend around 10 to 20% extra animals on each study, not only to keep tight-knit groups, but also to foresee if animals die during the way or exhibit adverse effects that were not accounted for. In addition, preclinical researchers spend 20% of their working days on manual weighing and manual supervision of animals. And despite these efforts, we still see unforeseen outliers occurring. There's a lot of hours during the day where the animals go unseen and can exhibit the actual pathophysiological effects that you don't see when you're present. That can set the whole drug developmental chain back with weeks, months, or years. Current solutions out on the market, mainly the technological solutions, lack in functionality, as they require you to restructure your workflow, taking the animals out of their home environment and placing them into something else. They're very feature heavy, and they measure a whole lot of things that the researcher is not really interested in for a daily basis. Those can only be used for specific studies. We want to propose a new way to monitor the animals 24/7. This is the future of animal monitoring, where we're driving the digitalization of preclinical studies through an in-home cage monitoring system. The way it works is you place your track solution inside the cage, you put your animals on top, and what it does is it weighs the animals individually and uses deep tech or AI to monitor the activity and coupling these to different behavior patterns they would see in different disease models. It can be used as an alarm system to notify you and give you a quick call to action of what is happening inside the cage, or it can be used for continuous monitoring, and it's a plug-and-play solution as we operate within the cage. Some examples of the output that we can get are, of course, weight trends over time, and also if there's any abnormal activity occurring in the cage that reaches a certain threshold. That's why we're coming to the market with a solution that can reduce the number of animals used, as you now harbor more control of what happens in the cage. We limit the manual intervention, and we secure the data quality, as oftenly animals mask their actual adverse effects in human presence. Of course, we increase animal welfare, and we do this in line with the 3R. According to the largest breeder in the world, TrackPaw is estimated to be a need-to-have product in about 50% of all cases where they use animals. And we can divide it further into different disease models that are very popular, the largest chunk being cancer, followed by neurology, of course, and biomarkers and metabolism studies. But the preclinical segment usually consists of 3 phases, or it can consist of these 3 parts. Basic research, which accounts for clinical observations, different behaviors that are more linked to biological occurrences. We have applied research, or disease-specific, more typical for certain disease models, and then preclinical GLP accounting for regulatory tox studies. Keeping these colors in mind, we plan to cover mostly of the basic research during our first year of launch, which will be in 2026. Because we're data-driven and need to combine data in order to train our algorithms, we'll start dwelling into the disease-specific market in 2027, offering CNS-typical behavior patterns that we can analyze, diabetes-typical behaviors, and so on, before we reach and become GLP certified in 2031, also covering the tox market. If we put this into numbers, in our most prominent markets in the EU and US, they use accordingly or around 3.3 million cages per year, so that's the market opportunity. And if we so cover 50,000 of these with our track solution, that will lead a serviceable addressable market of 1 billion SEK per year. We aim at reaching a net revenue of 160 million in 2029. Looking at the projection a little bit, we're launching a beta version next year that's going to be tested by selected global pharma companies and breeders. We will then launch sharply in 2026 before reaching a break-even 2027. The key milestones we've reached this year: among many, we've applied for a patent that is extremely broad for both the hardware components and for the actual application of an in-home cage monitoring system. We've raised a little short of 7 million SEK, and we have pilot studies and LOIs signed with some of the most prominent pharma companies in the world. We're raising 6.5 million SEK, for which 5.1 is already signed for a pre-money valuation of 15 million SEK. This will increase or prolong our runway until September of 2024. And our plan is to utilize this capital in order to develop the product so that we can launch the beta version. And we do so very close together with the commercial market. They tell us what the requirements are, we build the product. In that sense, we want to continue to nurture our commercial market and our customer interactions. And of course, we've seen indications on how to even further expand our IP portfolio, which we wish to do in the upcoming year. The team that will drive this to success is a compilation of researchers that worked with animals and faced this frustration firsthand, and also of brilliant engineers, both on the hardware side, but also on the machine learning side. We are all backed up by a senior board of directors or executives with long experience in the pharma industry. We have a previous global director of all preclinical studies from AstraZeneca with us. We have seniors from Pharmacia and Novartis with us, and also global distribution experts and business developers. So why should you invest in us? Well, not only do we have LOIs and global customers on the line ready to test the product, we've seen that there's been a paradigm shift where the first ever pharmaceutical declaration has been signed by major players like Merck, Sanofi, Novartis, Novo Nordisk, all allocating resources and time to find better and more sustainable ways of performing animal research. Because they, just as us, realize how crucial animal testing is, but we want to do something about it. And I hope you're with us during that trip. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you for stepping in on such short notice.
Of course.
It's great. Well, let's see. What questions do we have here? Let's start with this one. What are the main reasons for customers to buy into this? Is it more like cost savings or increased quality for studies, or maybe a bit of both?
Definitely a bit of both. So scientists, we've noticed, are frustrated and share this frustration with us, that they spend so much efforts on monitoring the animals, but that never being enough. Still, they're facing outliers. So basically a paradigm shift where we're getting fed up with the analog and manual ways of how we monitor animals.
Yeah.
So definitely a time saving and increasing of the quality of studies we see.
And has the product been tested in a live setting? And if so, what did you see?
Yeah, it has. In selected labs here in Lund, it has been. And in a week, we will launch our first pilot testing with one of the largest pharma companies in the world. So we're super excited for that. So what we've seen from those types of studies is we get reproducible data from the weight sensors. So there's a matrix of weight sensors in the platform. And we're now developing it to be compatible with different chip systems that you use. We've also seen very clear data on, for instance, aggression between mice. And that's one large market as well, where you want to have an alarm system for when that happens so you can separate the colony.
Mm-hmm. You obviously mentioned the benefits within drug development for this technology. How about in academia? I assume there's a potential there as well.
Absolutely. The academia, we see more of a partnering unit. Very important for us in order to get out publications and spreading the word through that way. Of course, that's super important. But we aim for the pharmaceutical and CRO market firsthand.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you mentioned a partnership with a big pharma.
Yes.
What is your partnering strategy?
What is your
partnering strategy?
So it's built on trust and built on sharing the same frustration and coming from that root. So I find that very beneficial that I myself have been facing the same sort of needs that they have, so I can profoundly understand what their needs are. So the partnering strategy is a lot of information dripping as well. We've seen that if we spoke to one partner, another one recognizes us and wants to speak about it. So that and a little bit of luck. Of
course, luck is always beneficial there.
Right.
Well, it's good that you already have so much interest from that side, especially. Let's see. You gave a number of 50,000 SEK, I'm assuming here, translating to 1 billion SEK. Is that your best market penetration estimate? When will you hit this mark?
It isn't. So there's a lot of shadowing in these numbers, especially when you look at the States. There is no real sort of document that you can read on how many animals are actually used. Here in EU, we're very, very strict with documenting exactly. So we expect that the market size is much larger. We're still figuring it out how much. But estimates say that around 10 to 100 million animals, or mice specifically, are used in the States. That's a huge gap that we're trying to close.
Yeah. Let's see. No more questions here on the app. Any questions here from the audience? Any live questions? So many shy people. Yeah. Well, maybe I can ask you another question here. You talked about having raised money already, but what is your strategy for raising money, especially looking forward?
So our strategy is to look locally. We have mainly attracted investors from the Öresund area, and we plan on continuing to do that. And we want to have an investor in with financial muscles to follow us in the upcoming round. Our next round will be at around 9 million SEK. So we already have one partner that can follow us up on that, but having another one would be just exquisite. So that's our strategy, is to find someone with financial muscles and also the drive for what we do.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the time we have, but thank you so much for answering the questions and your presentation.
Thank you for listening.
And next up, I'd like to welcome Karin Brieder, the CEO of Colzyx, or Colzyx.
Thank you. It's Colzyx, and it comes from collagen 6, so that's kind of the background here. Yes. Welcome. I'm going to talk about WoundCom, and it's this little guy here. And we're going to talk about wound care. So wounds, when you cut yourself, when you're kind of slicing the onions at home, you open the skin, and it can be infected, for example. But usually it works out. You stop bleeding, and then everything goes by, and you soon have just itching, and it goes well. But sometimes it stops, and it gets to a vicious cycle, and that's chronic wounds or hard-to-heal wounds, depending on how you want to say it. These wounds are open, and they do get colonized by bacteria. So almost everyone is that, and when those get activated, the patient gets antibiotics to clear them. Almost 65% of every wound that we take care of in the medical system are chronic wounds. So those ones do get a lot of antibiotics. They get bacterial infections, as well as the surgical wounds can do, as you've probably heard about, and also trauma wounds. Why is this important? Well, we have a problem on our hands. It's resistant bacteria, multi-resistant bacteria. Almost 100 people a day in Europe die from multi-resistant bacterial infections. Not with, from. And why is this? Because we've overused and misused antibiotics for a long time. And it's not only the food market or food processes that have been doing this. It's the medical as well, and still doing. So where do we come in? Yeah, of course, we want to treat it where it is. So we've developed a wound dressing that looks like some kind of dishcloth, and it's based on only natural ingredients. It's kind of an artificial skin. It has collagen 1, that's all in the skin, and then it has peptides from collagen 6, Colzyx. Those peptides, they are antibacterial, and they also exhibit wound healing properties or cell proliferative properties. Combining those two, you get a wound dressing that can do both. It can elevate and be good for the wound, for wound healing, the cells in there, kind of get rid of all the vicious inflammatory signals, but also take care of the bacterial infection, and that is really crucial. If one then try these out and put bacteria, there's the green buggers there, on the product, you don't get anything, really happens anything if you don't have the peptides there. That's the collagen. And then in wound.com, they get killed, they burst, and they kind of do all these kind of that we've colored pink here. So the pinkish stuff, it's a debris from bacteria. On the other hand, if you have human fibroblasts and put those on the material, it grows quite well on collagen 1. And that was collagen do in the skin normally. What if we have the peptides there, it's actually elevated, so they grow even better. This means that there is a wound healing activity. Using those in vivo on highly infected wounds in pigs. These pigs are healthy. They will take care of the infection. They will take care of the wound in around 21 days. But if you use wound.com, 2 to 4 days, the wounds were totally clear from infection and had healed. This is the effect we have on with wound.com. So Colzyx here then, where are we? Well, next year we're going to have our first clinical investigation on hard-to-heal wounds, venous leg ulcers. And to do that, we need to have passed everything with kind of the manufacturing and the biosafety or the safety program and an efficacy study in animals, as you saw. Pigs are not the only ones we have tested on, or we have some case studies in horses. This is, of course, a kind of huge but also crowded market. But what is a wound dressing? It's everything from just a Band-Aid, where you're just going to kind of try to not get blood everywhere, to very advanced wound dressing for very advanced wounds. Burn wounds, you need maybe a skin transplant. Then you have a reconstruction of the skin. But you also have these kind of hard-to-heal wounds. There are a lot of different kind of wound dressing out there. But no one has the natural ingredients that we have combined. Some collagen dressing have silver, and they have PHMB, but those are toxic in the long run because they're toxic to normal cells. So the market is, of course, quite large, with all these kind of different ways of thinking. US is the largest market, mainly because, or it is US market, but also because they're kind of positive for collagen, if we just look on collagen dressings. But why should we? We should, of course, look at all the potential wounds, and especially potential wounds that could be infected, which is almost any wound, though, but one could then market it in. This is a Class 3 medical device. That means that we, of course, differently, we need to do this clinical investigation. We also have to apply for a CE mark or an FDA approval, and an FDA approval. And it takes a while. And while doing this, we will enter and work on the veterinary market. We also have the peptides. So Colzyx is built on the peptides from collagen 6. We have interest from some players that would like to in-license, and that means that we out-license the peptides for other applications. Because we also have a technology where you can glue them on to a lot of different materials. So while awaiting, we intend to have some revenues on those. Of course, then, as the first clinical investigation is on hard-to-heal wounds. We would like to expand to other indications and also to other territorials, in addition to Europe and US. I'm, of course, standing to here and talking, not only because I want you to know about this great wound dressing that you would like to use, and you can use on your horses and dogs and cats for now, but also we need some funding and some money to do these things that we would like to do. We have secured the clinical investigation, but there are a lot of more things we would like to do. And these are some few of them. Today here, I also have with me my chairman of the board, Jens Hansson. So afterwards and during lunch or whenever, please contact us. And we will answer all the questions, show you some samples and some results. Thank you.
Thank you, Karin. Okay, wow, that is super soft.
Yeah, it's super soft, definitely.
Well, that's actually a perfect segue for my first question. Why is the cloth the best product, and why not an injection or another form of administration?
That's a good question. This, as I said, is a medical device. It means that turning that around, if we were putting the peptides into some other administration, it would be a pharmaceutical, and that would probably work as well. The good thing here is that we know that the collagen 1 matrix, or the scaffold here, is a well-known product, and it works perfectly for some wound healings, but it doesn't have the antibacterial. So it's kind of a very nice product, new extension of a product that's already there. So I wouldn't say that it's not possible. It could be possible, but it has another route, of course, if you have it in some other way.
Yeah, we'd use a different regulatory framework.
Definitely.
Of course.
Yeah.
And that actually brings me to my next questions. What are some of the challenges, the regulatory challenges for a Class 3 medical device?
It's the same for any medical device, of course, that it has to be tested in these kind of ways. The challenge with this one is that it's Class 3 with additional peptides in it. So it's kind of, we have to have a very close look at the peptides as well. So I don't see any more challenges than a 2A or 2B, more or less. It's just that it needs to be safe. I mean, the regulatory path is make it safe, and it should be efficacy. So that's for anyone.
Sure. And you talked about testing this on pigs and horses.
Yeah.
How translatable, how easy is it to translate this into humans?
So it could be, yes. Horses is interesting because horses' legs. So those kind of case studies that we have, I can show anyone that's interesting. I have some kind of pamphlets on them. They kind of try to jump something or kick to glass doors or something. And horses' legs do have a bit of a bad circulation, which means that they resemble the situation you have on a chronic wound. So that could be translated quite well. We don't use it in kind of the arguments, but it could be. We would like to actually then do a clinical trial on horses, just for not only for the veterinary market, but also to kind of have to translate it to the human situation. But I mean, we're starting the human trial, so
yeah,
or investigation.
Once you get to human trials, how difficult will it be to recruit patients?
The clinics that we have contact that's kind of in our application now, they don't think it's that bad. Of course, this is elderly people usually, and they need to go to the hospital, the clinic once a week. That could be an issue or a kind of challenge. But there is a lot of they have, I mean, when you ask them how many patients do your clinic meet, it's hundreds every week. But they still go down to a little bit less than recruiting. But I don't believe it should be that difficult. We're doing the clinical trial in Germany, so it's a bit larger population than we have here.
Yeah, okay, good. We've run out of time, unfortunately, but there are some other questions here, and I'm sure if you want to ask Karin more questions, feel free to ask her in the lunch break.
Definitely.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Well, next we have our first panel discussion of the day, and to present that, I will have our CEO, Jonas Söderström, come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Yes. First panel discussion of the day. So, this is going to be an expert insight session on the evolving landscape of life science investment, funding, and alternative sources of capital. And with me to talk about these exciting things, I have two seasoned veterans, Johan Kördel of Bioventures and Peter van der Meijden from van Lanschot Kempen.
Maybe stick to Kempen, easier.
Kempen is quicker to say, if not easier to say. Thank you so much for joining me today. Well, to give a short backdrop, we had a challenging market environment. Everyone already knows that. But there are wars, global insecurity, macroeconomic pressure. Fundraising is increasingly tough than for certainly in the public market, but arguably also in the private companies, for the private companies in life science. First, before we dive into that, maybe you would like to give yourself and your organizations just a short, brief presentation. We can start with you, Johan.
So Johan Kördel, I'm a product of Lund and spent a decade in pharma, a decade in biotech, and the last 15 years venture investing. So 2 years ago, we started Sound Bioventures, which is a Swedish venture investing fund that invests in private clinical stage therapeutics companies in Scandinavia, the rest of Europe, and the US, 3 equal portions.
And how much money do you have?
We have 116 million euros to invest. We have committed money to 6 companies and probably have another 6, and then reserves to follow.
Great, thank you. Peter, what do you do, and what does Kempen do?
Yeah, so Kempen, we are a Amsterdam-based investment bank, offices in New York and Amsterdam. We focus on 4 sectors, one of them being life sciences and healthcare, mainly working with European life sciences and healthcare companies, assisting them in the raising of capital, M&A, IPOs, both in Europe and in the US.
You yourself, you're based in Sweden, though, and you work with any Swedish companies?
Indeed, I am a love refugee, so I came here with my Swedish wife. And no, indeed, we work a lot with Nordic companies for the simple fact that there is an enormous amount of innovation in the Nordics when it comes to life sciences and healthcare. And there are, I think, just over 250 listed healthcare companies in the Nordics. To give you an idea, there's 110 in Belgium, the Netherlands, and France together. So that's really, it's an enormous market.
Which we might dive into later. So I think we could start with an easy question then. So looking at the many current challenges that we have in the market and the financial climate, it looks kind of grim. But when can we expect this to change, Johan?
If I had the answer to the question, I wouldn't tell you guys. because I would trade against that, of course. But I think for us as investors, and we're fortunate because we're in the beginning of a fund that has money, so we will have the same problem you have in a few years if the markets haven't let up. So for us, this is a fantastic situation if you're private, because the valuations of your companies, which we can come back to, is more compatible with what we see in the private market. So it's fantastic. But I think we have to look forward to the immense innovation that is ongoing. We're all getting older, we're all getting sicker, we need innovation. The innovation is happening faster and faster. The buyers have patent cliffs that they need to replace products with, so they need to collaborate or acquire companies like yours. And it will happen because they have $1 trillion to do it with. So if you have money, no problem. If you don't have money, you have to be careful with the money because eventually the markets will come back.
Yeah, I think that if you don't have money, it's the bigger problem, for sure. So, Peter, what's your take on the current state of affairs, and will it change, and when?
Yeah, no, indeed. Obviously, the reason we're here is that having this panel is that it's challenging. I mean, if it was all great, the discussion of today would be, I'm a preclinical company, I just raised 500 million, what do I do? So obviously,
we've had those panels too.
Yeah, 3 years ago. And no, but really what we're seeing is I would say a shift in how to fund biotech and life sciences in general going forward. We just came out of a period of 10 years with low interest rates. Funding was easy. We've seen an enormous liquidity bubble. To give you an idea, between 2019 and 22, there were some 400 IPOs on NASDAQ US biotech companies, whilst it was 1,000 in the previous 30 years. And a lot of them were early stage, a lot of them were preclinical, and they are now coming back to the market. So there is an enormous funding need, whilst at the same time, obviously, interest rates are up. And more, I think we're coming to the realization they might stay there for a little bit. And that, especially for a generalist fund manager, is an enormous challenge, because biotech at 7% in a DCF model is challenging, considering we need to fund you for an additional 9 years. And that's what we see in valuations. And if you look at the valuations of the companies that have IPO'd that were early stage, they are in the US on average down more than 70%, purely based on the interest rates. And I think on Friday we got another nice reminder that, or not nice, that the 10-year reached the highest level since 2007, and immediately market turns. And I think in general companies need to get their mindset different in a way that the ease at which we've been able to raise capital is gone, and there is a new reality in which interest rates will probably remain higher. There is indeed an enormous amount of money available with specialists, but from the generalists, retail, etc., that's really changed. I'll just add one more thing, and that's, I think, something that's incredibly important now going forward, is that companies need to change their mindset. What we see very often is you have companies that see their core business as we develop a therapeutic or diagnostics or medtech, and the other part of our core business is raising money. And they do that ongoingly. CFO, IR, CEO. Their IR trackers are a mile long. But we also see companies, unfortunately, that once a year they think, oh, it's time again. We should call a bank. So that mindset really needs to change.
Step up one's game. I should also say that when you hear something interesting or you come to think of a question, please use the app and send them in, and I will try to pick them up if we have time. Or I can prioritize your questions. They're probably better. So, I mean, you've touched upon it, the interest rates and so on. What are the key factors that need to improve then in order for financing and investment activities to come back to, say, pre-pandemic levels, or will they even?
I can take that. We just came back from a trip in the US meeting investors, and there some investors also said it surprises us at how people think interest rates are going to be back to where they were within 6 months. In developed companies or developed countries, it takes longer for them to come down again. Plus, there's this enormous funding need of all these companies that came to market early and now need funding. But I think what will really help companies is that they, especially, well, maybe not the ones that are in desperate need right now, but the ones that are starting their journey, is to really look at quality investors. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but very often earlier stage in 2019, 20, we would hear, yeah, we're speaking to specialists, but they're only valuing us at 50 million euros. And we can probably get an IPO value of 100 or more. Plus these specialist investors, they want to have some kind of special treatment and yada yada. And but really, it sets the rest of your journey if you go for the specialists at the lower valuation, because they cannot just they will not just be there when the markets are bad. They can also help you with the development of your product. They have a network with partners, etc. All of that to de-risk your case, because it's already difficult enough to understand the molecule, to optimize it, to put it in people, to dose escalate it, and then find a therapeutic window. So going that alone, maybe whilst going together with them, is probably a better option. So going forward, I would say, if you're in the starting phase, let the valuation, just forget about the valuation, not important.
Okay, I was just going to ask you, Johan, do you know any good specialist investors?
So let me answer the question this way. So there was a reason why the Anglo-Nordic conference was started some 15, 20 years ago. Some of you, I'm sure, have been there to present. And it was observed by London-based healthcare specialist investors that the prices for public companies in particular, but then as a consequence, private companies in the Nordic region, was much higher than anywhere else in Europe, apart from in Switzerland, where the same phenomenon has been observed, which is that we've had a strong pharmaceutical industry, now gone, that has produced a lot of wealthy people that have been investing as business angels and very good supporters of our industry. But as a consequence, maybe not having thought through the consequences of the valuations of the companies. So Hakan Gawker, who was one of the initiators of Anglo-Nordic conference, he thought, well, maybe if we can make sure that these companies from the UK and Nordics meet each other, they can understand that there is a difference in the valuations. Now, sadly, this has been fixed now by the markets. And I think the consequences is that we're going to lose some of our companies here, which is not good for the ecosystem here in Scandinavia right now, but it's going to be good for the ecosystem moving forward, because if the valuations don't come back faster than they do in the rest of the world, then we're going to get investors, I think, from other countries that are going to be more interested in investing in public or private companies here in Scandinavia.
I mean, you guys syndicate with investors on a global level, I wouldn't presume, or at least European.
We hope to.
Yeah.
And we have other venture investors in the room that definitely do. But I mean, one of the promises is a strong word, but one of the promises we've made to our investors in our fund is that for the Scandinavian companies, we hope to be able to attract capital from outside the region into the region. Has to be proven yet.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. And Peter, your organization, you are also multinational. Is there an interest, and is it increasing in the Nordic region to invest in the Nordic region, in the life science companies here?
No, there's always been an enormous interest for the simple fact that there were so many companies. Yeah, echoing what you said. Indeed, in the past, we've also heard, valuations. We see them as Europe, Sweden, Nasdaq, US. But to put that into context, what you have here in Sweden with First North and Spotlight and Main Market is really a very unique setting. So on the continent, we see that is not really an option for companies there. They really need to grind it out earlier on with trying to find specialist investors, trying to be more creative in how they fund themselves. So there we would see that they maybe, for lack of a better word, give away more upfront, whilst if you speak to companies here and they say, yeah, we have interest from a pharma partner, but we don't want to give away everything already right now. Whilst there they would maybe say, well, we're only phase 1 or early phase 2, we'll start the partnership, we'll get a nice upfront, and they don't see it as giving away too much in the beginning. They see it as a natural way to finance themselves, which obviously in the last 10 years has been different here, thanks to or due to the liquidity that you've seen from retail, generalists, etc. Coming back to your question, yes, the specialists are really very interested in the Nordics. They scan lots of opportunities. They also make investments. You see international blue chip specialists in companies like BioInvent and many others. So they are looking at that, and more with these current valuations. Also VCs, and especially growth funds, are looking at that, and they just will treat it kind of as a private company, take a larger stake, become a more activist owner. Having said that, in the US, there's 711 listed biotechs right now. 160 are trading below cash. So there's also enormous opportunities there for them. And also when we speak to these investors, they say, I have 1,000 biotechs to look at. You think I look at all of them? Mm-hmm. So also as a company, again, a reminder that these people are busy. So don't rely too much on your bankers because they can open a door, but they will not keep it open always. You need to be on it yourself.
But you are available on the phone 24/7.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, great. But there are so many factors here that are interesting. But when you say that there is great interest in the Nordics, and we've often heard that we have great science here, or we do have great science here. But then again, as you said, the dynamic or the special conditions that we have with the stock market, many companies going public early and so on. How many of the fantastic companies sort of are disqualified from an international investor's viewpoint as investments due to the fact that they are public and perhaps then very badly funded right now?
Those are two different questions. So, I mean, badly funded is, of course, a good opportunity for an investor because you can probably negotiate harder with the valuation.
You sort of come back to that a lot.
Right. But I think, I mean, and I've been on this stage and many other stages saying, you get the owners you deserve. Think about that, okay? So, for all the companies that did go public when it was possible to do that, if you didn't have any other alternatives, I mean, great, you did something good. You got funding for your company. If you had other alternatives, now is the time to think about what would have happened if I'd gone some other route. So I think coming back to the question, which was,
I just feel that what you just said is sort of like saying to your kid when they trip and fall and hurt their knee, and you say, "I told you so."
Yeah. Or in Danish, så kan du lære det. But I think the thing is that by going public, you expose yourself for exactly what's happened now, right? And on one hand, you have innovation and wanting to be impactful on saving humanity and making people's lives better. On the other hand, if you're a real entrepreneur, you want to make money. And I feel that some of the rush to go after, if you will, the easy money when the markets were open here in Sweden was driven by either the need for people who were getting tired of financing your company to get out, or the entrepreneurs actually wanting to get something that looked like they had money. And that now has its price in that the valuations are extremely low. And we have gone to our investors and asked, so look at the situation here in Sweden. We really should be investing in public companies because they're so low valuations right now. And they've said, yeah, but that's not why we invested in you. We have other people doing that, yet to be identified though. So we've talked to some of you guys about, okay, can you think of situations where you could place one of your programs in a private setting, which of course are many different ways of doing that. It doesn't have to be a delisting, where you actually have a private subsidiary that gets financed by actors like us that want to act in the private arena. And we've had multiple discussions like that, and unfortunately at the end it's usually us saying that we didn't like the asset enough to go through the trouble of doing this the hard way.
Sorry we made you jump through all the hoops. So, I mean, taking public asset private, that's one, it could be an alternative route then to sort of, or divest something from your portfolio perhaps. Peter, I'm guessing as the kind of bank that you work for, do you see many different alternative options than to find financing these days?
Yeah, we do. And just to add, the valuations that we see right now are lower actually from a equity cash position than they were in 2000 and in 2007. So indeed, you can say valuations are low and there is the opportunity. But indeed, it's now to see, okay, what companies will be able to prevail. You need to keep on delivering. But in terms of the alternatives that we see, again, trying to make the comparison Sweden versus other countries. Whilst here it's always been equity, and every year you do your 10%. You ask your EGM for your mandate renewal, and then you come by and you do your 10% or 20%. And on the continent, we do more often see, like I said, these earlier stage partnerships because they need it and also because they want it. Coming back to the international ones and how they look at Sweden, sometimes they do look at companies that they think they look cheap, but then looking in more detail into the program and where they have taken the program, they say, it doesn't really make any sense. And then if they would have had maybe some specialist help or a pharma partner, they would have probably guided them in a different direction. So no, it's not interesting because this is probably going to fail. So I think again, the help early on is really good to have, and not seeing it as we're giving away anything. But in terms of alternatives, people are a bit more creative on the continent. We see with convertible debt, with royalty financing, with selling off rights in smaller countries like Switzerland, or markets that they find maybe are not as important, like China, or convertible debt. We see it a little bit more now here in Sweden. What we hear sometimes is, yeah, but they're just going to sell the shares. Yes, coming back to your point, you get the owners you deserve, or let's say for every situation that a company is in, there is a certain type of financing available. But nobody else wants to, at this particular moment, finance you. These guys are there. They will help you finance so that you can move on. But indeed, they will probably not want to own your share. But in general, I would say just the openness of companies, and especially boards, to be a bit more creative in how to finance. And I think that's mainly because they are forced to do it, whilst here in Sweden, because the liquidity has been there for 10 years, there's not really been a need. So again, I think the mindset, and there especially, I think boards, a bit more seasoned boards, can really make a difference.
So, crisis could be the mother of invention. So then having this again, because many of the companies that we work with are private, public. They wish they were private, perhaps, but they are public, and now it's just, we're stating the facts. You should have done this, you should have done that, perhaps. It could have been better to do something else, but it's all a product of the public market and being extremely accessible, capital being thrown at them, and of course it's very easy to go to the candy table instead of the vegetable table when you're
But I mean, public markets are a great tool. They're a great tool to raise money. They're a great tool to use your share as a currency and maybe help your company grow by means of M&A, etc. So I think public markets are a great way to go for companies. But indeed, you need to really have the mindset, okay, we're a public company. I need to deal with shareholders. I need to do roadshows. I need to do conferences, etc. And one thing I wanted to add is what we also see, especially in the US, which here is a little bit of a wait-and-see strategy still, is hard decisions being taken by listed companies, just laying off 30% of the employees. We have 3 projects. We're stopping 2 of them. Or we're doing a reverse merge because we're probably not going to be able to finance ourselves. So there we see that those kind of hard decisions are being taken, and we'll see more of that. And here it's still a little bit more, maybe we think about that next year if we cannot find investors.
But I think there's an element of maturity here also, because many of the companies that did go public were still preclinical or early clinical, and you're still in that, if you will, development phase where the true value of your innovations haven't been proven. So I am of the strong belief that such companies should not be public, but then eventually the public markets are absolutely needed and are a very useful tool when it comes to scaling up, and especially when it comes to commercialization. And I think if you're moving towards that phase, using royalty financing or using debt financing, I think is a good tool. But the problem with that kind of financing, especially with the debt financing, when you're still in the discovery mode or development mode, is that there are covenants that you have to follow, which usually are that all the money they lent you should be in the bank. And if you stray from that, they take the company away from you. So much more punishing than the other types of investors that you can work with.
But also in the private setting, private companies then using these alternative vehicles to fund in an early stage, that doesn't exclude them from your radar then?
No.
Good, concise answer.
And more tranched type of investment rounds we see now as well, both very often private, but also public, so that they say we'll give you a small amount now. If you reach a milestone, there's more to come. And we see also more kind of the structured equity product now, where it's topped up with warrants, so that investors have the possibility to say, okay, you did well, there's more to come. And there's not that many companies in Sweden, I would say, daring to do it yet, but slowly we are seeing that, okay, this is a good option.
And but then will you speak to many investors that are looking at public companies as well? But what kind of, because I know you and I talked a little bit about private placements earlier, that could have sort of seen a little bit of an uptick in that solution. But what kind of return do the investors expect then these days? I mean, and the risk appetite, is it completely?
Well, everybody wants to have 10x, of course, but no.
3 is okay.
Between 3 and 10.
That's generous.
No, but I think in general, what we do see is that focus is more on mid to late stage for public market investors. Again, also, like you said, the earlier stage ones, we've seen the preclinical IPOs at $200 million valuations. But we see let's say the public specialist funds shifting towards these mid to later stage assets, accepting, let's say, a lower return, but also very much from the viewpoint, okay, this earlier stage company could be very interesting, but how are they going to finance themselves? They're going to call me 3 more times, and at what valuation? So it's de-risking for now on the public markets still.
And Johan, I noticed that you only mentioned clinical companies. On your website it says near clinical companies, but you dropped that now.
No, we haven't dropped it. And as everyone in the room knows, you need a lot of money when you get closer to the clinic. So right now we're saying 12 months before the first dose in man.
I'm actually going to pick up a few questions here from the audience, and this is directed to you, Sound Bioventures. You mentioned that you've invested in 6 companies. What's your strategy during the upcoming year? Is there a target number of new investments?
So it's more a factor of how much money we have, but we're saying that we probably are building a portfolio of 12 companies right now. So the focus is very much on Sweden, and the US right now, because of the geographical spread we want to have. The 6 companies we've invested in have been in Denmark twice, Holland, Belgium, Spain, and the US. So we're lacking that Swedish piece.
Great. That actually, well, we are about to conclude, so I would like to ask you can you please give a piece of advice that can instill some hope?
Something positive.
Yeah, something positive to end with, please.
Well, I think the something positive is that you still see enormous amounts of money flowing into the sector. I mean, R&D spending is 10x what it was in the 80s, inflation adjusted. You see that the healthcare sector remains the second largest sector on the stock market after tech. When we speak to specialist funds, they continue to raise record after record fund. It's been a bit of a pause, but now it's coming back, also because you see pension funds saying, yeah, we've dabbed a little bit ourselves in that public biotech, but you know what? You guys do it. And what we also see, I think, which could be very interesting for many people here in the room, is that big pharma, like you said, they've obviously have an enormous amount of cash. No, they are not buying First North companies. They're not buying it because it's cheap. They buy later stage assets still. I think of the 14 big M&As we've seen recently, most of them are phase 3 approved. But what we do see is that they do need to start diversifying their portfolio. So they're starting to invest more in early stage R&D partnerships. And there, I think in the US last week, there was a good example where a company which was worth, I think, $50 million market cap, got $100 million up front from, I think it was Lilly, for an early stage partnership. So I think there is the opportunity that these will be looking at earlier stage partnerships. And I think it's a good idea to do that. Don't think a bit of giving away anything. But so that money is really available, not to buy your company, but for earlier stage collaborations.
That's positive. Johan, do you have anything positive for us?
But I believe in the future, and I believe in this field. I mean, if you have a strong innovation, it will survive. And unfortunately, if it's not strong enough, there is still a little bit of a valley to get through.
Perfect. Positive notion with a little negativity. I think that's still...
Reality.
Yeah, reality, yeah. Thank you, guys. We've run over with 1 minute and 42 seconds. I think that's okay. Thank you so much for your time, and give them a warm hand.